I went to this conference. I was a presenter. I was on the keynote panel, but I also did a workshop. And they were like, can you use NASA as a demo for the reconnaissance? And I said, sure, absolutely, no problem. And live at the Kennedy Space Center, I found hard-coded credentials of a NASA employee basically on GitHub for anybody to see. So if we go through here and we start looking, you're going to have to blur this out, but everybody's going to have to believe me. If we scroll down a little bit, what is that right there, David?
Wow.
So that's a bearer token for a NASA.gov server to log into one of their web applications. It's in a credential file. So you're going to have to, and it's to an FTP. There's also an FTP site referenced here. That's theirs.
So for everyone who's watching, I've got a big surprise for you. Jason's going to give away 2 places on his course, but you've got to find the link in the video. I'll give you a hint. It's towards the end of the video. So make sure you watch the content and then you can enter to win one of 2 places on Jason's course. What a brilliant view. Hopefully you can see a little bit of what I'm enjoying here in the US. Just finished a conference in Las Vegas, but I really prefer this kind of scene. What a brilliant view. And I really want to thank our brilliant sponsor of this video, brilliant.org. They are not only sponsoring my channel to allow me to create more content, which you'll hopefully enjoy, but they also have an amazing platform. I was introduced to Brilliant by one of my team, David, who has used Brilliant to keep himself up to date with his computer science knowledge that he learned at university. Brilliant have a fantastic interactive platform. Rather than just watching videos or reading a book, you can learn interactively with Brilliant. Use the link below to get a 30-day trial and a 20% discount. So go to brilliant.org/David Bombal to start your journey today. I really want to thank them for supporting me by sponsoring this video, but also for the long-term relationship with my channel. Hey everyone, David Bombal back with Jason. Jason, welcome.
Hey everyone, how you doing?
Jason, it's fantastic to have you back. We had amazing feedback on our previous video. Just for everyone who hasn't watched that video, I've linked it below. Jason was showing us how to hack Tesla. But Jason, you got to tell us about today's video because I'm really looking forward to this. You hacked another big company, right?
Well, I mean, public service company, whatever you want to call it. But yeah, so about a few months ago, I went to a conference called Hack SpaceCon, which was held at Kennedy Space Center in Florida, which was an amazing experience. This is where they shoot off rockets in Florida here in the States. And so I went to this conference. I was a presenter. I was on the keynote panel, but I also did a workshop. And last week we looked, or a couple of weeks ago, we looked at reconnaissance when we're looking at an organization. And so I was there, and some of the IT leadership for NASA was there as well. And so we went there, and they were like, can you use NASA as a demo for the reconnaissance? And I said, sure, absolutely, no problem. Because a lot of times my students, when I teach the workshops or something like that, they're like, can you do my company or whatever? So
of course, big mistake, but yeah, go on.
Well, yeah. So went and started doing a lot of the things that we did last week, uncovering what websites they had, finding out their presence on the internet, and found a lot of domains that were theirs, a lot of subdomains. And so about halfway through, I get to the section that we're going to go through today. Right, we're going to try to finish off reconnaissance today, and one of the sections that I'm going to cover today is looking at GitHub for leaked credentials. And live at the Kennedy Space Center, I found hard-coded credentials of a NASA employee basically on GitHub for anybody to see. So live credentials. And so I had to stop the workshop and talk to the IT staff and basically submit that through the bug bounty and make sure that they could remediate it and get it taken off of GitHub. So we're going to talk about that method and a little bit of cred hunting today as well. So.
And how long did that take you?
As soon as I started the tool, it took me literally 30 to 50 seconds, somewhere around there.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. I mean, the thing about that technique that we're going to talk about today is just, there's a million developers that work for any company. I mean, not a million, but anywhere from hundreds to thousands, depending on the organization. They all have GitHub accounts, and sometimes they make mistakes and they accidentally commit their bash profiles or a piece of source code that shouldn't be public to their public profile. And so finding it can be a really effective way as a red teamer to gain initial access, is finding creds that have been leaked to GitHub. So
now, when I do these videos, a lot of people complain that perhaps, we're telling stories.
Right.
It's never going to happen again. But you were telling me offline something very interesting about what we're going to cover today, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So we'll go through it in a couple minutes. So let's talk about GitHub real quick, right? So as a red teamer in my day-to-day job at Buttobot, we're doing red team campaigns. We're very focused on external to internal, so finding initial access. And a lot of times in our space, it is phishing that a lot of people rely on. But since I have such a very high skill set with reconnaissance and bug bounty, I am very used to having to try to get into an organization from the internet, not using phishing, basically. And so a lot of new school red teams are focusing on finding credentials and things like that. But the first thing I do, we covered last week, if I go over my checklist here on the left, we found Tesla's IP space, we found some of their acquisitions, and we found basically a whole bunch of servers that they had in the cloud and that they owned, right? And so we're going to start from the end of where we finished off last week. We looked for the cloud stuff, and we're gonna start with GitHub, right? And so at this point in my reconnaissance in a red team campaign or a bug bounty hunt, I am going to still be looking for the last little bit of subdomains for my target. So today we're going to switch to nasa.gov. If you are interested in helping the public good, you can go to BugCrowd, and NASA has a vulnerability disclosure program. So if you find anything with NASA, some of the stuff I found today, I'm going to submit through this, and they will have it. And so, it's basically a place where if you find a vulnerability for NASA, they'll take it in and thank you. And it's not a paid program, but it's definitely for the public good, right? We want NASA to be secure. So.
But I mean, you kind of alluded to it, and I'm just going to emphasize it. In this video, you're going to show us some credentials that you found. Obviously, we're going to blur it out, not make it available on YouTube.
Yep.
But it's not like this only happened once.
No.
It's happened again now.
In fact, I have several examples, but we'll get to them in a second. So, okay. So we're still on the finding websites portion of Recon, right? Right here in Git subdomains. And so what I'm going to talk about today is a tool by a colleague of mine, Gwen, and he makes a tool set that basically is a scraper for GitHub. Now, he makes several tools. If I zoom in here, he has a data extractor to find subdomains, to find endpoint, like all this stuff. Basically, all of his tools are written in Go or Python, and they'll go out and scrape GitHub to find all this juicy information for us as hackers. But the one we're going to use today at first is we're going to use Github-subdomains. And Github-subdomains will help us find more sites for an organization like NASA. So if I go over here to my console, so I've downloaded and installed GitHub subdomains right here, right? And it's a really simple script. You just give it -d and your target top level domain. So nasa.gov is NASA's top level domain. And then what you have to do for GitHub subdomains is you also have to give it some of your GitHub tokens. So when you sign up for a GitHub account, just as a regular user, you get an API token. And so that's how it does its search. It needs an API token. And so I have actually 8 tokens referenced in this file right here. And then it'll use that to search GitHub. And then the last part here is I just want it to give all the output to a text file. And so when I run this is the syntax for the tool here, GitHub subdomains -g, and then your target, and then your tokens. And then it will run, and I've done a previous run because it takes quite a bit of time, but it'll run with your tokens, and it'll begin to go look at GitHub and find anywhere in source code commits on GitHub where nasa.gov has been referenced. So you can see here, and this domain was referenced here in this repository. And so it'll scrape and spider all of GitHub to give us every reference it can find to nasa.gov servers online. And so when you're done, you end up with a giant list of extra targets to hack, right? And again, that's the point of Recon. The more targets I can find, the more chance I have of getting into an organization as a red team or as a bug bounty hunter. So if you go down to here and I just finish, I can go to my output file since this is already ran. Cool. So this is going through GitHub and finding everything. And then when this is done, I need to put an output file. So 3.nasa.gov, and now we should be able to cat 3.nasa.gov. And then you just get a list of subdomains it found from nasa.gov, and this is all from GitHub. So this is finding more assets of NASA, more websites of theirs to hack. And you can see there's some duplicates here. So using shell scripting, I would cat and unique this. And I think when I finished my big run of nasa.gov, there was something like 6,000 reference sites on GitHub. So NASA's a tremendously large organization. Lots of web servers out there on the internet. So that is discovering domains from GitHub, right? And so the tool we used there was Gwendol's GitHub subdomains, which is here, and it's written in Go. it's pretty fast for what it does. So it's probably one of the best tools for this type of enumeration.
Jason, just remind us from the previous video, for people who perhaps haven't watched it, you say there's a lot of reasons to get subdomains, right? So if you can just give us like the 60-second overview of why it's important to get subdomains.
Yeah. So when you're looking at an organization as a red team or in a bug bounty hunt, the main website is often where many users go and just do their thing, right? But that organization has anywhere between 10 to hundreds to thousands of other websites, right? And they're normally referenced by subdomains. And so we used some analogies last time we were on the show, but the more websites I can find as an attacker, the more opportunity I have to break into a place like NASA or Tesla or something like that, right? So the bigger they are, the easier it is for me to get in from an internet website or some kind of server that they put online. And so that's why we spend so much time finding all of these sites, because everyone to me represents an opportunity to hack in. And they're some of the ones, their main website probably very secure, right? They've probably had penetration tests done before it. They do a lot of security analysis of the main website. But some of these other websites we're finding, these subdomains, they've never been assessed for security. They're very undersecured. Maybe people don't even remember that they're on the internet. Sometimes IT staff create servers and they just go up on the internet and they never get decommissioned or something like that. So this is a very common thing when it comes to red teaming and bug bounty hunting.
So for everyone who's watching, I mean, Jason spent I think it was an hour and a half or so, the previous video, where we covered this in a lot of detail. So again, have a look at that video if you want more detail. Sorry, Jason, I didn't want to take you off your flow.
No worries. So that's finding subdomains with GitHub, and GitHub is a really powerful tool for us. So we're gonna get to the juicy part right now. So the next thing I do, and it's usually because tools like github-subdomains take a little bit of a time to run, is I start looking at an organization just using GitHub search. And so that's what we're going to talk about now. I call it Git analysis. It's right here. And I have basically created a small little script that'll take my target and give me some search links for the GitHub just user search. And so I'll show you what that looks like right now. So if I go over here, I have a small shell script here, and it's called git dorks, and I just feed it my target. So today my target is nasa.gov, right? And I say no here, and then it'll spit out all these links. And what it's doing is it's just creating some links for me that I can put into my browser. And so the first one is you have to be logged into GitHub. And I can grab this link and it'll search for nasa.gov and the word password and the type code on GitHub search. And so if I go to my browser, I have that here. So zoom out a little bit, and I am searching for nasa.gov in quotes and password. So you don't need my script to do this. You can just go log into GitHub, search all of GitHub for nasa.gov password, and you'll start to see entries of source code that have nasa.gov somewhere in there and the word password, right? And so you can scroll down through a lot of this, and some of it is very default. It's not, it's referencing just the word password, right? It's not a variable, or it's not like any sensitive password, right? But when you start rolling through a lot of this, you can start to get some interesting information. So the first thing you can get from this process is legit emails of NASA employees, right? For a red teamer, that's really valuable for me to have legit emails to phish these people, right? So you can see, we have some people at nasa.gov here. We also, like I said, get more information about websites that they have on the internet. And these are not NASA-owned projects. These are other people writing code to interact with NASA somehow. And so you can see that they're interacting with this server at NASA, et cetera, et cetera. So I've put password in here, and this is exactly what I did at HackSpaceCon. And, I was just, while the tools were running, I'm going through this looking for maybe any leaks that a user has done, right? And so right now on the first page, I don't really see anything. But one of my other searches is nasa.gov passwd. And more often than not, passwd is used as a reference for a password variable in code, right? So it's not just verbatim password, the word, it's now passwd. So if we go through here and we start looking, you're going to have to blur this out, but everybody's going to have to believe me. If we scroll down a little bit, what is that right there, David?
Wow.
So that's a bearer token for a nasa.gov server to log into one of their web applications. It's in a credential file. So you're going to have to, and it's to an FTP. There's also an FTP site referenced here that's that's theirs. So we're going to blur this out, but you'll have to believe me, David, you can see the password there, correct?
I can see it right there. Yeah.
Yeah.
I can see it.
Yeah. So this happens because obviously this developer has, committed, this file. They've ever forgotten that it was, online, or they forgot that their GitHub account was public, or they didn't remember they put this notation in this code or something like that, or hard coded the password. They just don't know about it, right? It just happens. And so this happens a lot in bug bounty hunting. Now, GitHub has done, and Microsoft, who owns GitHub, has done a lot of great work to notify organizations if passwords are hard coded in their code. But it works not as well as I think they would like it to, because this isn't an employee who's associated to NASA's own GitHub repository. This is a personal repository of mine or yours, right? Where they have interacted with NASA somehow and they have credentials. And so if I keep growing down here, I think there was actually a couple more that I saw. Let's see here. Here's another bearer token, same guy. Another search that I do in that little thing is credentials, right? NASA.gov in quotes, and then credentials up here. So here we're using another keyword. So NASA.gov space credentials. Remember, you got to have NASA.gov in quotes, so it force searches NASA.gov and then credentials. And so now if we go through these, let's see if we can find anything here. Usually you have to, really dig. And so that's why I do this while my other stuff is running. So I have an opportunity to just look through some source code that's been referenced about them online. Okay, so tell me what this is here.
Your auth token, right?
Yep. So this is a Git auth token. So Git they apparently have a source code repository, and you can see that the auth token is for Artifactory. Artifactory houses artifacts, or like libraries or pieces of code that I'm guessing that NASA uses for JPL here. So you can see their OAuth token and their Artifactory API key. So this is real stuff that happens in the real world. There's a couple things, like verbatim. These credentials could be used. It depends on if this server is an internal or external server. Now, I'm pretty sure that this one is an external server that I'm looking at right now, but it's going to be blurred to everybody. But as a red teamer, I would take these credentials and just verbatim try to log into the servers with them and see if they were live and still working and everything like that. Now, if they weren't working and it was a username and password, I still have the user and the username and password that they disclosed in this thing. And so in this piece of source code. And so I can try that username and password on different sites of theirs if I can find out what services they use, like SaaS sites or other login portals for NASA, because many people reuse the same password everywhere. So as a red teamer, I will use this information to go and try to get initial access in another place if it doesn't work verbatim on the server that's referenced in the source code. So that was hacking NASA here with you in under like a couple minutes, I think.
Yeah, and it's only because I'm asking questions and we're delaying it. But I mean, it's like I can see how you did this in 60 seconds. It's insane.
And it's not a hard concept, right? It's using, we did this for a long time with Google, right? Google dorking, right? And I don't know if anyone's been on the show before who does a lot of Google dorking, but this is now just the new school version of it. You should.
I'm just going to say, do you want Jason to come back and do Google dorking? I think so, Jason. You should come back and do that. Go on, sorry, I interrupted you.
No worries. Yeah, I mean, this is GitHub dorking. And so there's some automated tools to do this, but I end up doing a lot of this analysis for source code. I usually end up doing it by hand because I just want to be able to look at the code. Sometimes I click into these files and I really want to read them to understand what they're doing. Sometimes they're false positives. Sometimes these servers aren't online and the cred doesn't work anywhere, so it's not a big deal. Sometimes they're usernames and passwords for internal systems. Sometimes developers just put like a dummy password that actually is not like a real password to the system, but they wanted to put something in the variable to make it look nice. So you really have to go through and look at all these things, right? It's not just push button, receive bacon. It's definitely something you have to analyze. But yeah, so there's a ton of different things I look for. And if I go back to my script, I look for the keyword password. You have package manager, authentication, references, Docker config files, which can contain credentials. And these are all the types of things I look for. AWS access keys, right, is really important. S3 config files, which sometimes contain passwords, HTTP password, Git credentials, bash RC files, SSHD files. So all of these type of files I know to contain sometimes credentials. And so I will look at my target with these keywords. And I will spend a good hour to 2, sometimes 3, depending on how big my client is, looking for these keywords on GitHub for them to find different stuff. So that's what I'm doing while all of my tools that take a long time to run are running, basically.
Big question is going to be like this script that you you're speaking about that you wrote, is that available if I take your class, or how would I get that script, or
Yeah,
is
yeah.
it just something you use internally, or?
Yeah, so my script is public. I mean, it's just creating these links. It's nothing fancy, but it's
Yeah,
right here. I will send you the gist link, and
that'd be great. Yeah.
people can look at the kind of stuff. I mean, the important part is this part is like, what am I using? What am I looking for in the search? So yeah, people can grab that. It's free. All this stuff is in my class, my red teaming and bug bounty hunting class. So if anybody wants to take it and like really dive into like the whole process, that's awesome. But
Yeah, I mean, because of YouTube, we can only do so much,
yeah,
right? So
yeah.
just tell us about the class again. Let's diverge just for a minute or so. Tell us about this class. How many days? What do you do?
Yep. So my class is called the Bug Hunters Methodology Live. It's my own thing, right? It's 15 years of my experience doing bug bounty, external pen tests, red teaming, all this stuff. But it's the Bug Hunters Methodology Live.com or tbhmlive.com. Basically, I teach 2 days over Discord live, but it's over Discord. And I teach a whole bunch of stuff. So I teach all of this reconnaissance stuff that we're covering. So introduction to recon, reverse who is, like all the stuff that we're going to go over and way more. And then the second day, I do application hacking and analysis. So I do things like understanding where to hack a big application. I find that like one of my favorite content creators is Rana. You work with Rana, and
Yeah.
she does such an excellent job of explaining the vulnerabilities on some of these sites. But what I find less people teach in the industry is when you're an actual tester, a red teamer, or someone who's doing this for a day-to-day job, those targets that a lot of people train on, there's a vulnerability in that page, right? So that's a lot easier than when you get in the work world and you're doing this for a living and there's an application with hundreds of forms, 100 parameters, 100 pages, thousands of different ways to try to hack it, and you get lost, right? And so the second day of my class is understanding how to approach an application. So what are the layers of the application? Where do you look for certain types of vulnerabilities? What tooling do you use to make this easier for yourself? What questions do you ask yourself about the application? And so that's what my class is about. It's less about like, here's SQL injection and here's how you do SQL injection against this form, because there's a million classes like that, right? I don't need to teach another class like that. I'm sure Rana does a way better job than me. But my class is about where do you look for SQL injection? So that's kind of what my class is about.
And I think we've got good news, right, Jason? We've managed to twist your arm to come back and actually do the hacking, because that was like the number one request on the previous video, right?
Yeah. So we'll do some of the hacking on next
Right.
episode. We'll finish out recon today and then as always, my team is available for contract if you guys are looking for red teaming. Buttobot.com. So my red team is super legit and we care a lot about our clients. So come check us out. So that's the course. And so we did GitHub analysis for subdomains and Git analysis for credentials. And so now we're gonna kind of go give you a little peek here. So this is one of the pages from my training deck. And so we're gonna talk a little bit for a second about the next phase of finding domains. So we have looked at the cloud. We have looked at what IP space our target owns. We have looked at GitHub, but there's a whole bunch of other sites on the internet that gather information about URLs. And so they do it for different reasons. So some of them are search engines, right? Every search engine is grabbing every URL ever. There's a whole bunch of infrastructure websites that give information about websites like the Wayback Machine, Census, Netcraft, like Passatotal, all these sites. There's all of these projects to categorize certificates like cert.sh and certdb. And then there's a whole bunch of security sites too. So on the internet, there's about somewhere between 60 and 100 of these, what we call sources of data that as a hacker, we used to have to go and manually go to these sites and try to use some, like Google Hacking Fu or GitHub, like we used there, using their search box and try to find everything they knew about our target. So we would ask every single one of these 60 to 100 sites, what do you know about nasa.gov, which is not time efficient. So we basically had like an advent about 5 or 6 years ago of some tooling that can do this for us. It'll reach out to all these APIs. And so one of the tools to do this that I use heavily is Amass. And so Amass and another tool called Subfinder will go out to all of these places and find references to our target. So in the slides I use twitch.tv, but we'll go live, and I did a run on on NASA before the show. So if I go back to the top here, and I will make this big once I get to the top. Okay, so I go here and I have Amass installed. Here's the command here for running Amass against NASA. So it's just Amass enum-d nasa.gov. And then I've added a couple of flags here to say, I want to know where you found the reference to nasa.gov. And I want it to be verbose, right? So I ran this, it's done running, but you can see it tells you right away where it's looking for subdomains for nasa.gov. And so the sublister API, the chaos data set, DNS dumpster, hacker target, these are all websites online that, Yahoo, all kinds of stuff, right? And so it tells me that it's going to look at all these places and then it starts giving me back data. So it found a reference to nasa.gov, URS earthdata.nasa.gov from this website and this website. And so it searches the entire collection of these sources to tell me more about NASA's websites. And so if I go down to the bottom here, I want to see if it's still running. And I started this well before the show started, right? And so it takes a little while to run. This is one of the things I start right away when I do my recon because it does take a little while to run. And it's going to give me a whole bunch of more at bats or chances to find stuff for NASA. So Amass is a giant tool set of recon tools, and it's written by a guy named Jeff Foley. It's an amazing tool. You can find it on GitHub at OWASP Amass, and then you can go here and check it out and download it and use it yourself. I think one of the things about Amass is it's thorough. It takes a long time to run because it's checking so many sources and it's doing a couple different techniques for finding sites for us. Now, if you want to do a quicker run of this same concept, there's a second tool written by a group called Project Discovery, which is called Subfinder. So Subfinder is written by Project Discovery, and they scope their tool a little bit tighter, and so it's much faster. And so you can run Subfinder and get output for any target in usually like anywhere between a minute and 5 minutes instead of I started Amass before the show started and it's still going right now. And so in my testing, I use both of these tools and then I just cat the output to a single text file and then sort it and unique it. And so I will use both sources. Between the two of them, Amass and Subfinder, they're the two best tools for finding subdomains from these sources online. And so Subfinder looks like this. So if I go back to the run I did just a couple seconds ago.
My question always for you, Jason, and I mean, I think you answered it last time, but
Yep.
you can give us the answer again. Is you get lost in the weeds here. How the heck do you know what's important and what's just stuff?
Yeah. So the answer is not as fancy as people really want it to be, honestly. If I really want to hack NASA or Tesla or any of these big companies, right? Like every single one of these, like I said, is an opportunity. So there's no way to really just like give up on any one of them. So at the end of running Subfinder, it found like 6,000 sites, right? So like, how do you get through 6,000 sites? Well, there are some strategies. So the end part of all of this, when I finish running all these tools and everything in my checklist over here, right, I end up with a whole bunch of lists of subdomains, and I basically dump them all into a Redis database on my Linux box. And then I unique them, and then I take that, and so now it has all these tools output in this database, and then I tell it to print out all of the subdomains again, and then I use a tool to screenshot them. And so the tool we use for screenshotting is down here. It's called HTTPX, which is another Project Discovery tool. So Project Discovery is this amazing group of developers who write security tools, open source security tools. And they have been contributing to the security scene for several years now. But they have many different tools, and HTTPX is another one. Subfinder is one. They have many different tools, but they are probably one of the biggest contributors and advents to the security scene as far as tooling goes since Nmap, I would say, as far as like how prevalent they are in our industry. So I will have a database of all of the subdomains, and then I will just feed them to their HTTPX tool. And let's see if I can do that here. So I have a file of NASA stuff. So okay, so I will zoom in here. So I have a file of some of the output of this stuff, right? And I can just do cat. Let's see what's in here. I called it 2 NASA or 3 NASA. Okay, cool. Yeah, 3 NASA. So here's an output, right? So now I have their tool HTTPX installed. And what this will do is, remember, we're getting these subdomains from GitHub and from all these new places on the internet, but we don't know if they're live yet, right? And so normally what you would have to do is port scan these, but HTTPX, its base functionality, what it does is it just tells you, is there a website on this domain? So you can just cat all of your domains and pipe it right into HTTPX. And so this will tell you, yes, there is web servers live for all of these websites. So that's the first thing we need to do. We need to pare down our big data set to stuff that's live with websites on it, because we're going to attack websites. And so this will go through and attempt to make a connection on port 80 and port 443 to all of those subdomains. Now, what you can also do with HTTPX is there's a whole bunch of stuff you can do with HTTPX, but one of the cool things you can do about HTTPX is you can do screenshots. And let me find the flag for screenshotting here. So you can pass it SS and it will go to that website once it's live and take a screenshot. And so if we do that for our NASA stuff, it will begin screenshotting. Now, this will take a while, right? It has to open a headless browser, go to the site, take a screenshot. But what this will allow us to do is it'll give us a folder with the name of the subdomain and a screenshot of the page it lands on. And so that is a way I can pare down this list a little bit. I'll get a folder of screenshots and I'll start looking at the screenshots and just be like, oh, that looks interesting. That looks interesting. That looks interesting. I'm going to hack those things first. Now, that doesn't mean I can skip any of the other sites, because there might be vulnerabilities on the other sites. But screenshotting is a way that we can prioritize kind of our hacking a little bit, which sites we're going to choose to look at first. So when I'm looking at those screenshots, what are things I'm looking at? Well, I'm looking at sites that, basically look like they were written not with current generation frameworks, that don't have very good CSS and styling, right? That indicates to me that, they were probably not really paid attention to a lot, probably haven't had a lot of security love. And so I will definitely look at things like that. I will also look at the name of the subdomain. So we talked about this in the last show, right? But if I look at some of these subdomains, I can see that this one is get.earthdatanasa.gov, right? Now, I don't really know what this is, right? But anything that's a Git server, I want to look at because it might contain source code. Anything that has like dev or engineering in it, I want to look at because, might have developer information in it. I want to look at their verbatim API because definitely want to check that out. Because I'm a nerd, I want to check out JPL, right? So that's right here, right? So so there's a lot of things like you just gain over time, like through hacker intuition. Is like, what do I want to look at? And it's either visually through the screenshot or through the name of the subdomain usually. But you can't skip anything. You have to look at like almost everything. So.
But that's what I love about your training, right? And I don't want to hop on that, but I think it's important to say there's a difference between knowing how to do something and when to do something.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
And I mean, it's experience is a big thing, right? But sorry, I interrupted you. Go on.
No worries. Yeah. I mean, that's what I try to train everybody I work with and stuff like that. It's you can use the tools all day long, but the I don't know, the golden kind of stuff is the context around hacking, right? It's knowing when and where to apply your efforts. It's knowing how to get the last 10%. I talk about that a lot in my training, right? Where many people will just run the tool, not configure it super well, or they won't go through everything and they'll miss out, right? And it's usually that last 10% of effort that I put in, or knowledge that I've had contextually from working in the industry that allows me to, win. And in my case, when I say win, is succeed on an engagement, right? Break in. So that was Amass and Subfinder, right? So Amass is still running right here. It's still finding stuff. It could run for another hour. You never know. Subfinder, we ran and we got a whole bunch of stuff back. And then now we have a giant list of stuff to hack. So there are some other tools in this area that I use in my class. One is Bbot on top of Subfinder and Amass. I put it all in this scraping bucket right here. Also, when Amass finishes, it gives you a really nice table to tell your customer, like if, they're obviously people are paying for this service from us, right? It'll give them a map of where everything they have is. And honestly, many times when I finish doing this and I give them the output of the map, they're like, oh my God, we didn't know we had all of this infrastructure. People laugh at that and they're like, no way that happens. And it absolutely happens with an organization as big as NASA or Tesla, right? It's just a giant business. Stuff gets bought, purchased, acquired. Marketing people go out with credit cards and buy Amazon space and Azure space and stuff like that. So it's really interesting to hand it back to the security people and be like, did you know you had all this? And they're like, no. In fact, one of the things I did at DEF CON is I did a panel with a whole bunch of red teamers like myself. And it was just war stories. And one of the war stories that we had was I started it off so they could get some time to kind of compose, what they wanted to talk about. But without telling the client name, I mean, we had a client name come to us. and we did this recon process for them. And the first thing we found was a whole bunch of stuff in AWS, and we started looking at some of those addresses as subdomains, and a couple of them were AWS S3 buckets. And inside of the AWS S3 buckets were source code of certain different types, and inside of the source code was their AWS secret key, hard coded. And so we had access to terabytes of data. And this is literally, we haven't even started the engagement yet. Like, this is after the sales call, basically, and we had found all this stuff, and so it was a really good moment to say, hey, like.
But you made them sign first before you told them.
Yeah. No, we did not. That's not something we gave it to them, and but yeah, so that's
no, I'm just kidding. I mean, that's really good of you, because you basically you didn't have to, but you told them already before you'd signed. Sorry, and I interrupted your story again.
Sorry, no, all good. No, I mean, so that's the kind of stuff that happens when you go this extra level, right? You do this reconnaissance. So, okay, so we're gonna switch gears a little bit to the red teaming side. So we've found a lot of sites, a lot of subdomains. We can take some screenshots, and really with this checklist, looking at all these places, we will have a really great set of data for what we can hack. And then, so in a red team, now that we have stuff we can hack, I have to switch gears a little bit, and I want to look at for more of these credential mishaps, basically, right? And so with us, and this does not happen in the bug bounty world because it's a little bit sensitive with that. But in the red team world, you end up doing a lot of what's called threat intelligence. And so we talked about looking at credentials on GitHub, but there are other places where you can find credentials. So I am sure that you have probably seen, the site Have I Been Pwned, right? I'm guessing.
Yeah. So I interviewed Troy.
Yeah, you interviewed Troy.
If everyone is watching, I've put that below. Troy's got fascinating stories to tell.
Yes,
sorry, go on, Jason.
Absolutely. So in the red team level and the threat intel level, we're going to do some credential hunting. And so if I'm looking at NASA, right, what I want to do is Troy has this massive database that he keeps up to date. People feed him breach information, et cetera, et cetera. And then you can search through for your email address. But this is a consumer site. And so it's made for you or me to go and put in our email address and make sure that we're not in one of these breaches. And then if we are, change our password, right? And so it's a great public service. Now, for a red teamer, I actually want to search the databases and try to find passwords for targets of my company. So I would want to search kind of this data for nasa.gov employees and see if any of their stuff is out there. Now, there are levels of credential hunting in red teaming. So you can look on source code, GitHub and GitLab, which we did earlier, and then you can look in public breach data. And everything that's in Have I Been Pwned, I would consider, it makes it to the clear web. It makes it to Troy, and it ends up in Have I Been Pwned. And so it is like level 1 of credential hunting. Now, the inverse of what Troy does, Have I Been Pwned, is a site called Dehashed. And so Dehashed is a website, dehashed.com, and it's mostly for red teamers and threat intelligence people. And it's the same idea as Have I Been Pwned, except for you can get access to all of the data that comes in those breaches, including the usernames and the passwords and everything like that. So the first thing I will do is to use Dehashed to see if there's anything that made it to the clear web for credentials of my target. So I have an account on Dehashed, and you would go up here and you would just search email, or actually I think it's username, colon, and then we will just search nasa.gov. And so then you have 205 results, and it tells you here's the user. So we're gonna have to blur some of this out, but here's the user, here's where their breach data was from. And if you click on it, you get their username, email address, hash password, phone number, everything that was in the data breach. And so some of these you can get non-hash passwords. Some of them you get hash passwords. Depending on the hashing technology, you could try to crack it yourself, which I think some people on your show have done password cracking before. So, but this stuff has made it already out to the clear web, has probably already been changed. So what Dehashed is really useful for me as a red teamer is really the email addresses. These are valid email addresses of people I could phish in my social engineering portion of the red team campaign. And so I will check all of these to see if the credentials work. I will also gather the email addresses from Dehashed. And so Dehashed is a tool that a lot of red teams, count on to search those, data leaks that end up to the web. So that's like level 1 of cred hunting.
So you mentioned clear web, right, a few times.
Mm-hmm.
But when we spoke previously, you said your company does a full-on
Yeah.
attack against a business.
Yep.
Because a hacker is going to go on the dark web, right?
Correct. Yeah. So we'll do that in a couple seconds. So.
Oh, okay, brilliant.
Yeah,
okay, because I was going to say it's all good and well saying we're going to stay on the clear web, but
No, it's fine.
people with that are less scrupulous than us,
Yeah. Oh no,
they
totally,
don't care.
totally. Yeah.
Sorry, go on.
So this is like level 1 of credential hunting is dehash. There's other sites like dehash that other places prefer to use, but they're all the same idea. You can build this database yourself too, right? So these data breaches, the kind that end up on Have I Been Pwned and dehash, they end up in all kinds of places, but most often a torrent ends up online of the data breach. And you can download it to your local box and build your own credential and username database from all of these things. It is a lot of work. And so a lot of people forgo doing that. They just use dehashed instead because that's their job. Dehash is a site, their service. You pay for it and you get access. It's not very expensive, honestly, for the dehash service, but it is a for-pay site. So it has an API and you can search all this stuff. You can get even more stuff if you just do nasa.gov instead of username. It will come back with thousands of entries where it sees nasa.gov as part of the username, password, or metadata for a breach. And so we would look through this. Now, one thing here that I like to tell red teamers is that, okay, so we may have got, when we did the first search, a whole bunch of people back that credential no longer works on the site that it got breached from, right? Or it may not have worked on the site that you wanted it to work on when you found the password, but that doesn't mean it doesn't work anywhere else. And so when you're looking at an organization, you have to realize that they use a bunch of software, and a majority of it now these days is SaaS software. So they log into some web portal somewhere to use a thing like Miro, or what's a good example, like Salesforce or something like that, right? And so when you get these usernames and passwords from dehash in this level 1 cred hunting, you take it and you try it on those SaaS as well, because they're not integrated when the user changes their password at work, right? If you change your password at work, it changes for all your Microsoft stuff and stuff like that, but that's not always connected via OAuth or whatever authentication mechanism to Salesforce or to Miro or to whatever. And so we've had a lot of initial access where we've been able to get access to SaaS sites using stuff off of dehashed. So a list of like common SaaS sites, I think. I don't know if I have it in here, but I will give you guys a list if I can find one. Yeah, but I have a list of SaaS sites that I'll go check these credentials on. So that's level 1. Now level 2 is right here. It's private RAS sale. So the next level of finding credentials is the dark web portion of kind of the ransomware as a service ecosystem. And the biggest player in this ecosystem right now is Lockbit. And so I have my Tor browser open here. I have Lockbit's website here. Let me refresh here. But Lockbit is an organization that provides the Lockbit ransomware, which is one of the most prevalent and probably best ransomware that exists out there. But ransomware is just a software. So what Lockbit did is they're the first big enterprising organization as a bad guy organization is to democratize the process of hacking and ransomware. So what they do is they say, hey, are you a hacker? Do you have initial access somewhere already? We don't care how you got it. Did you phish somebody? Did you pop a Citrix box? Did you do whatever? We don't care. What we'll do is we'll give you our really good ransomware software. You ransomware the organization and we will split the money with you, 60-40, 70-30, 50-50, whatever they agree to. And so you have this ecosystem of hackers and then Lockbit, and it's called ransomware as a service, basically. Now, if you go to I'm in the Tor browser right now on the dark web right now. If you go to their main site, you can see that they have ransomwared, a lot of companies. And what they do, what their MO is they say, hey, we've ransomwared this company. They have so many days to reply to pay us the ransom. Otherwise, we publish the data. And so this is where a lot of these data dumps get published before they hit the clear web, right? Is they're through Lockbit and a community that's behind Lockbit. And so you can see here, if you were to go into any of these, you'll be able to download the data from Lockbit, basically. And again, people reuse passwords everywhere. So if there's a big site on here that doesn't pay and it gets published, like you can reuse those passwords on other sites and stuff like that. So this is kind of level 2, is getting into the forum and Lockbit ransomware as a service ecosystem. There's also a whole bunch of forums. There used to be Genesis Market, which was a big one, but it got taken down by a whole bunch of law enforcement. But there have been ones that have come up and replaced it. Russian Market. There's a whole bunch of sites that have come up to replace it on the dark web, where you can buy and sell credentials and breach data. So This is like level 2, is going to the dark web and finding credentials via these places about your target. The last and most deep level of kind of credential hunting is behind all of this, even dark websites, is secret Telegrams, Discords, and WhatsApps. And so this is the secret sauce. I'm not going to reveal how we do our stuff here, but we actually enter into these chat channels via different means, infiltrate them, and monitor sales of breach data that are even before they get to Lockbit. And we can monitor if our customers' stuff ends up in those chat channels, basically. And so those are the 3 levels of kind of red team credential hunting that you use to gain access. It's public, and then dark web, and then like the secret squirrel, Discord, Telegram, and WhatsApp stuff.
So on our YouTube videos, you did quite a bit on level 1
Yep.
and some level 2. In your course, do you do level 3 as well, or is that only when we get you as like we become your client? Get your service.
It's only when you become a client, and that's so hard to get into these groups.
So confidential,
Yeah, it's very confidential. Yeah, so it's definitely not something I'm really giving away our tactics and stuff like that. I mean, it's not overly hard though, right? Like the chat rooms exist. You just have to get invited to them, right? And you have to find out where they are, and you have to get invited and prove that you're hackery enough to get in there and provide something of value to get an invite. And so that's kind of how they're managed, right? It's all a web of trust between bad guys. So but yeah, we don't really disclose all of our methods to do all that, but we do find a lot of initial access from credential hunting in all 3 levels, right? Some people, the stuff out there on Dehashed is still usable. I would say like 20% of the time, maybe. When you get into the private RAS, like Lockbit stuff, more like 50% efficacy rate, I would say. And then when you get into Telegram and Discord, it's usually closer to 80-90% of the credentials you find there are live, can be used in a red team campaign. So
Jason, that's amazing, right? You've covered a lot. I think the big question a lot of people have been asking, and we kind of mentioned it already, is they want to see actual hacking. So you'll come back and do more of those videos, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So the second part of my class is the first day is all recon, which we went over a whole bunch of stuff on. And then application analysis is the next part of my class. Now, I don't want anybody to go in to think that we're going to go like hack stuff live. Like, I mean, maybe we'll do some labs or something like that to show some vulnerabilities. I know you've had a lot of guests do that. What my content is about, and in my training and when I train, it's about where to look for vulnerabilities on websites. And so that's a lot of my stuff. But yeah, happy to come back, talk about anything there, more red teaming stuff. We haven't even broached, what happens after you get initial access? Like what C2s do you use? What, post exploitation tools do you use? All that kind of stuff. So if you want me back, happy to come back.
Yeah, so for everyone who's watching, please put comments below, the kind of stuff you want to see. I think, Jason, the big difference between someone with your kind of experience, like years and years and years of experience, versus someone who's just like gone through, and I don't want to mention names, but like just like labs, is when and how the tools should be used rather than just what the tools actually do.
Yeah, I mean, that comes with a lot of experience, but that's what I want to shortcut for people when I come on stuff like this, right? Like the end of the day, it's about making people more secure, right? And if I can help shortcut someone who's learning to do this stuff, and by shortcutting that, we make the internet a little bit more secure, I'm super happy.
So Jason, just for people who want to reach out to you and perhaps learn more, is Twitter or X as it's called these days the best place? How do they get hold of you, and what do you recommend people do?
Yeah, so I have a website. It's jhaddix.com. There's a contact form there if you're interested. My company is Buttobot. It's a red teaming consultancy. We do all this kind of stuff. We do a service called continuous adversary emulation. So we do a year-long campaign for this type of stuff. And then you can always interact with me on Twitter. So I am at jhaddix, and I tweet about all things offensive security. My class is linked and pinned to the top. I talk about resources. I do interviews, all kinds of content stuff off of Twitter.
But I love what you're doing, man, because it's, people who are starting their journey don't have money necessarily. When you're a student, you want to try and get as much free information as you can to, start your journey. And I really appreciate you, sharing so much amazing content on YouTube and other platforms.
Thank you.
But, once you're in the industry and you want to learn more, perhaps the company can pay for you, or, you can afford it, and then you could attend your class. And obviously, if you're working for like a big company and you just want to make your company more secure, they can engage and get you guys to like test, right?
So I'll tell you what, my next course isn't until December. So I give it a lot of time for me to get ready for it because I update it every time I do it. I'm going to send you 2 invite codes for 2 free seats if you want to give them away to your channel viewers and if they want to come and check it out. So
Jason, really appreciate you doing that, man. That's amazing. So for everyone who's watched till this part of the video, this is why you need to watch to this part of the video. I have put a link on screen now. If you click on that link, you'll be able to enter to win, and we'll randomly choose the winners. So Jason, I really appreciate you, doing that.
Yeah,
and
no problem.
People need to watch to the end of the video.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I think that's all I had for today. We'll come back and do more application-y, hacky stuff next time, but awesome to come on.
So just for everyone who's watching, put your comments below. Let us know the kind of stuff that you want Jason to cover, and please go and follow him on Twitter. Go and share the love. Jason, once again, really appreciate it, man. Thanks.